Hop, 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 I lay my little legs. Hop, 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 and then I hide my eggs. Hop, 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 oh, won't you find my eggs? Chomp, 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 yes, eat my little legs. Yummy, yum, yummy, yum, yummy, yum, yummy, yum. Oh, I like to watch you eat my eggs.
Hey, howdy, hey, and happy Easter, people of the internet. Wolfman47 here. So, there's a few different sort of things that you call Easter eggs. There's the sort that we receive on a day like this, where we eat, and most of the time it's either it's mainly chocolate, although I have tried a cheesy one before. And then there's also the sort of Easter eggs you see in films, TV shows, video games, anime, and the like, which are often described as like hidden details or stuff that you only ever see if you're like a truly hardcore person that loves to analyze anything and everything in the stuff that you see. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. 25 Easter eggs that are in our favorite TV shows, films, video games, and we'll just go from that. So let's not waste any time. Let's get right to it. So you'll remember from my last topical vlog that I talked about a thing called A113. Now, those of you who need a refresher or don't know what A113 is, it's a little Easter egg that appears in a lot of different animated films, in particular Pixar's films, and lots of other things too. It's largely known as a classroom where all the big animation gurus and what have you, such as Tim Burton, went to that particular class to learn how to become animators and become the big legendary household names that they are today. And I've just somehow I've just lost my thing. 1 second. Here we go. And it's appeared in pretty much every animated film since it became a thing. The only time where it's actually become part of the plot is in WALL-E, where it becomes a crucial plot point. But it has appeared in other things too besides animated films, but it's mostly known for being part of the animation universe. So yeah, that's A113. So Uncharted 2, Among Thieves, and Assassin's Creed Brotherhood were released around the same time as one another, and both of them starred Nolan North, who plays the main protagonist in both games, or in Assassin's Creed case, he plays the main protagonist in the present day setting. And while both games may not have all that much in common, with the exception of maybe finding treasure and lots of free jumping and all that, there is a moment in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood where Desmond Miles asks Lucy if she wants a boost. Now, to a lot of people, this may not be a big deal or reference or whatever, but this is actually a line that he actually did say in Uncharted 2 as well. And the person that his character was with actually took that up, whereas the person in Brotherhood didn't. So yeah, it's a nice little reference there, very subtle as well. Star Wars is a galaxy full of different species out there, and while we still have yet to discover what Yoda's species is, and Grogu's for that matter, there is one familiar species that you may not have noticed, and even though Phantom Menace is often regarded as one of the worst, if not the worst, Star Wars film ever made, it's not without a few things that people like, and one thing that people do often miss is during one of the big council scenes or Senate scenes, whatever you want to call it, in which if you look very carefully, you'll see E.T.'s species among the representatives there, indicating that his species could exist in the Star Wars universe, or it's just a little nod to George Lucas's collaborations with Steven Spielberg, who was the man that actually convinced him to go through with Star Wars, because Lucas just had no faith in it to begin with. So yeah, that's that one. So you might be familiar with a trilogy of films that's called The Godfather. It's basically one story with the first and second parts being based on the book, and the third part just being the big epilogue to conclude the trilogy. Something that you'll notice in a lot of scenes is oranges. Now, oranges in scenes may not sound like a big deal in the film, but But every time an origin appears, it usually occurs when the film's about to reveal that there is a traitor or something else among the mist. It's basically a case where someone is revealed to be to have betrayed a traitor, and yada yada yada. So, little detail there. You'll see in a lot of films that the crew, who are usually behind the camera, not actually on the camera, they sometimes or often appear in the films that they create. Such examples are Stan Lee, who appears in not all but most of the Marvel films that were released during his period of time being alive. He appears in all the MCU films up to Avengers Endgame. Appears in some of the X-Men films, and yeah, he's a person that appears in a lot of different films. As well as him, Michael Bay has appeared in some of his films that he's directed. Alfred Hitchcock has appeared in films that he's directed. I think Stanley Kubrick appeared in one film of his at least once or twice. And I think there's probably many others as well. But yeah, those were the main ones for me. Of course, I can't talk about Easter eggs without talking about the very first Easter egg to do with finding hidden details, and that is in an Atari game called Adventure. Now, this Easter egg is now, most of you may know this Easter egg just because it's a plot point in Ready Player One. Adventure is actually a real Atari game, and if you find the Easter egg, if you find the sort of little dot, you go back to the beginning, and then you go into a little area, and then it sort of reveals the first credits in the video game. So yeah, that's a little Easter egg for you, the very first one. Moving on from that, Fight Club. We don't talk about Fight Club. If it's your first time, you got to fight, no shoes or shirts, and yada yada yada. Don't worry, I'm not taking this off. And throughout the whole film, there is Starbucks. There's a Starbucks in pretty much every single scene, and some people could assume that it's because it's a major promotion thing for the film, but then other people are of the opinion that it actually does play a big part in the story, as proven by the director David Fincher, who did confirm that Starbucks is part of the story. So, yeah, that's that one. So often when we see films and video games, sometimes we assume that the video games and films are set years apart from one another. But then there are a few times where, even though for us it's been set years apart, it's actually not as big of a deal as it is, when it's kind of a big deal because we've grown up, we've enjoyed watching these films or shows, and for us it's a few years, but for the characters in the show it's only been a few. Could be a few days, and one good example of that is John Wick chapters 1 and 2, in which the second film is actually set only a few days after the first, and they actually pay very close attention to detail to ensure that everything that was in the first film is in the second film as well, sort of pristine, as it were, as if nothing really happened between films. So yeah, great attention to detail, that one. So the very first Pixar feature film, Toy Story, had a character called Sid, who was the main antagonist. He's the only character in the series, as far as I know, that is actually an antagonistic child, a sort of mirror of Andy, if you will. And he actually appeared a second time in Toy Story as the garbage man in Toy Story 3, as indicated by him wearing the same skull top that he wore in the first Toy Story. So that's that one. And he's looking like he's chilled and all that, so he's kind of gone over the trauma that Woody and the toys caused him in the first film. Spoilers if you haven't seen that film. So yeah. Of course, some Easter eggs can actually be literal Easter eggs, and one such example is the Rocky Horror Picture Show, in which the Easter eggs in that film are actually literal Easter eggs. And apparently during production they had Easter egg hunts and all sorts of other stuff. So yeah, an Easter egg that's actually a literal Easter egg. Who'd have thought? So in Casper, there was a scene in which Dan Aykroyd, in his Ghostbuster attire, arrives to try and bust Casper, but fails. So in a way, it's sort of like a little crossover, but at the same time, it's not a crossover. It's just him making a cameo in his character, because I think both films were being produced at the same time. So yeah, it's nice when films being produced at the same time with similar premises and so forth decide to have a stab at one another for whatever reasons that may be. So you might remember from my first PS5 game that I did a video of, Astro's Playroom. That game itself, even though it's marketed as a sort of tech demo to sort of demonstrate the PS5's capabilities, it actually has a lot of Easter eggs and references to all sorts of PlayStation games from across the years, not just PlayStation's own games, but also games that have made the most impact on a PlayStation console. So think Final Fantasy VII, and many others. It doesn't feature all of them, because as we know, Spyro and Crash belong to Activision, formerly belonged to Sony themselves, and then licensing issues and yada yada yada. So yeah, it's a big, massive Easter egg hunt, that game. And speaking of big Easter eggs in games, there's Borderlands 2, which features a lot of Easter eggs, but the one that I quite like seeing is creepers. Creepers being these creatures from Minecraft, which probably look harmless to begin with, but if you get very close to them, they will all explode. So yeah, something to watch out for when playing that game, and also Borderlands 2 if you get to that point that looks a bit like Minecraft. So yeah. Often when you see video games that no doubt will get sequels, there's some games that will will have some build up to the sequel, and sometimes said games might actually do it in a subtle way instead. And one such game that does that is Batman Arkham Asylum. Now, no one really knew if Batman Arkham Asylum was going to be popular enough to get a sequel, but it turns out it was actually a very good Batman game, and one of the greatest superhero games of all time. So much so that a sequel was guaranteed, but the developers decided, as a sort of little nod in case the game did not get sequels, that they would include a secret room that can only be accessed a certain way and in a certain area of the game. And in that room would be a plan for what would eventually become Arkham City. So there you go. That's that one. So Hitman games have been known to hold a lot of creative, wild and crazy stuff, including Easter eggs. But one Easter egg that I quite like is the one in Hitman Absolution. So this game is sort of a very non-linear game, which doesn't have a hub world or anything like that, but it does sort of have levels in which every assassination you do can be different. Same targets, but it can be done a different way. And there is one point where you get to drag a shirtless character and this particular character is the son of one of the main antagonists of that game, and you basically tasked with doing what you want with the character. You can leave him for dead or shoot him down. Either way, he's a goner. If you don't kill him, he will sort of say a few lines during the results screen, and then eventually he will get eaten up by eagles. Whereas if you did actually kill him, there are ways you can do that, and one of the most creative ways is getting an ice cream truck in. And you do this by, I think, and I'm probably wrong about this, you need to shoot certain tree stumps in a certain order, and then wait till the character moves into position, and then you move yourself into position, and then a spinning ice cream truck will come round, and it will basically just smash the guy in, and he'll end up being a ragdoll thrown in the air. And yeah, it's one of the most funniest ways a character dies in that game. There are lots of funny deaths in Hitman, I must admit, across the game. So yeah, that's that one. Of course, every Marvel game has references to all sorts of Marvel stuff, and the most recent Marvel games, the Insomniac Spider-Man games, also have references. Now, talking as someone who has used NSFW mods for my playthrough of Spider-Man, Yes, he has been showing off a lot more flesh than you think, because yes, I am into men and women, as most of you know. But the game actually does feature a moment where you do come across a character that is basically another shirtless Spider-Man, and this is a reference to Greg Miller, who many of you may know on the internet. He is quite well known as a video game critic, gamer, and so forth. And one of the big memes about him is him being a shirtless Spider-Man. So yeah, you have a moment with him in the game, even though it's not actually him, but you can get the connection there. So I might have mentioned in my Lego Dimensions video that as well as the official franchises, there are a few franchises that do make an appearance as well, but they're not officially in the game as it were. And there's various ways as to how you get to those franchises, but the thing and usually the way to do it is use the TARDIS or the DeLorean to do that. And in the game you get to see the Flintstones and the Jetsons levels. You also get HAL 9000 pop in as well, and a bunch of other things occur too. And it's just a fun thing because Flintstones and the Jetsons are of course part of Hanna-Barbera, which Scooby-Doo, which is definitely a part of the game, is from. But they appear in the Simpsons levels because, well, they are basically... The Simpsons is pretty much those shows, but for modern audience, in a way, so to speak. So yeah, there's lots of different franchises in LEGO Dimensions, not just the official ones, so do check those out when you get a chance to. So The Last of Us, as we know, has been making the headlines lately with the success of that the TV show has had. And in the very first game, if you get to a certain point and you go into an apartment or two, you might come across a few references to other games created by Naughty Dog, who created not just The Last of Us, but who also were the makers behind Jak and Daxter and Uncharted. So you might find little Easter eggs and references to those games. But the one that strikes me the most is pinatas of those characters. Yes, you do get the PlayStation consoles themselves, and yes, Crash Bandicoot does appear in a future Uncharted game, but the pinatas in Last of Us are the ones that I think are just like the best little hidden detail in an otherwise very serious, very depressing game with a bit of hope in there. So yeah. So during Saints Row 4, it does feature a lot of references, homages, and so forth to all sorts of different things in the sci-fi stuff. But when you get to the points where you do have to rescue your comrades, you do get moments in which you have to save them. And some of these are more interesting than others. The ones that strike me as interesting are the ones that actually feel like you're playing a retro video game. So the first character you rescue is a character called Matt, and you actually get to do this sort of text adventure. Now, before video games had pictures and moving things and so forth, they were mostly just text games where you had to put in some letters and text and so forth and see what happens. So yeah, and that's just a good homage to that. So yeah. I, of course, couldn't talk about Easter eggs without talking about the one thing that most Disney films have, which is hidden Mickeys. As we all know, Mickey Mouse is the main mascot of Disney, and even though his original short Steamboat Willie is now in public domain, Mickey is still very much part of Disney as their main mascot, and he's actually appeared in more Disney films than you realise. Now, you might be thinking, where is Mickey? Why can't I see him? Well, it's actually not Mickey himself. It's actually the sort of two circles and a big circle that appear. So, and if you look very carefully in most of the Disney films, you will actually see him. And this little detail has actually appeared not just in Disney films, but it's also a major part of the Kingdom Hearts 3 game. It's also appeared in other things too. I don't know if it's a Pixar thing as well. I know the first few Pixar films they made, there wasn't a hidden Mickey in them. I don't know if that's still the case, but yeah, that's just one of the many joys of of Disney. They feature Easter eggs and references, and even though they're not doing as great as they once were, it's nice to see these little things. So yeah. So going to Nintendo now, there is some of the Paper Mario games feature Easter eggs and references to video games and other things, and one of the best ones for me is Francis's room in Super Paper Mario. Now, in this particular scenario, Peach, Bowser, and Mario go to the world of Francis, which is already a pixelated world in itself. And upon arrival at Francis's place, you get to play a little sort of dating simulator mini game. And it's not the first, and it's not the last time, but most of the references do appear. Most of the Easter eggs do appear in his particular part of the game. You do get a sort of Pokemon-like battle later on in the game, but the best one for me is when you get into Francis' room, you do the dating simulator, and then you also see all these different Nintendo consoles from up to the Wii, just appearing in his room. So it's kind of nice. So yeah, that's that one. Kingdom Hearts has been widely known as being one of those games that feature hidden bosses, and it kind of borrows that from other Square Enix games that are RPGs. And the one that I really like is Julius, who is the only time in the Kingdom Hearts series in which an actual Disney character is a hidden boss, and you find him in Traverse Town. And he's basically a sort of Frankenstein-looking Pete, so to speak. From one of Disney's darkest old cartoons from their Silly Symphonies shorts. So yeah, I know Sephiroth has appeared as a hidden boss as well a few times, or one time. So yeah, that's that one. The Simpsons is also known for its references and Easter eggs, and there's probably one that you see a lot but you don't actually pick up on, and that is when you see Homer's hair. Now Homer doesn't have much hair, but the few times you see his hair, it looks like the initials of the show's creator, MG. So MG standing for Matt Groening, who was the creator of the show. So interesting detail, that one. Sticking with Matt Groening, another one you may not notice to begin with, but you will notice much later on in Futurama is the whole thing of how Fry ended up going to the future in the first place. Now, in the very first episode where he actually does go to the future, you do see a little tentacle with an eye appear. And if you're watching Futurama for the first time, you probably just think nothing of it, and yeah, it's just something that's there. But later on in the show, Nibbler is introduced, and then in an episode where Fry goes to the past, you do actually realise that Nibbler was the one that sent him to the future in the first place. And they have like a very special episode where Fry debates whether he should go to the future or stay in the present. And it's quite a not as funny but a very interesting scenario there. So yeah, a little hidden detail to begin with, but does have a major plot point later on in the show. And last one I'm going to talk about is callback quotes in Hot Fuzz. So Hot Fuzz is the middle chapter of the Three Flavor Cornetto trilogy, and you may not notice this in your first few watches of it, but later on in the film, you do get you get these quotes that you probably don't think nothing of, but then as the show continues, these quotes actually become part of this sort of final clash, because then you hear all these characters say the quotes that you've been hearing throughout the film. So the greater good, the greater good. Somebody call the police. I don't know, pup. And very good what he said, and all the rest of it, and fascist hag, and yeah. So yeah, it's a nice way to sort of end the film. So like seeing all these characters say their famous lines during the final clash. So yeah, and that's all the 25 Easter eggs that I can come up for this video. I might do this again next year, just come up with 25 more Easter eggs. So yeah, I hope you liked this video, and thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, comment and subscribe. See you next one. Peace to you all. And I know everybody's going to say this, and I'm going to say it as well. Don't eat too much chocolate today. Enjoy your Easter eggs. Just don't eat too much of it because you're going to get sick, especially if you've got the big Easter eggs. And yeah. All right. Toodles.